March 25th brings a noticeable shift in how you relate to the intensity you may have felt yesterday. Where the previous day may have carried pressure, emotional weight, or a sense of underlying tension, today offers a different experience. The mind becomes more capable of understanding what that intensity was pointing toward. Mercury forms a supportive connection with Pluto, and this creates a space where depth becomes easier to process. You may notice that something which felt heavy or unclear begins to make more sense. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, but through quiet recognition. A reaction you had yesterday may now feel more understandable. A situation that felt intense may now reveal its underlying meaning. This is not about new information. It is about interpreting what you have already experienced with greater clarity. Pluto still brings depth, but without the same pressure. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by what lies beneath the surface, you may feel more capable of observing it. The emotional intensity may still be present, but it becomes more manageable when it is understood. You may also notice a stronger ability to focus. Your thoughts may feel more precise, more intentional, and more directed toward what actually matters. Instead of being pulled into emotional reactions, you may feel able to step back and see the structure behind them. This can create a sense of psychological distance, not in a way that disconnects you, but in a way that allows you to understand without being fully consumed. Conversations may also carry more depth today. You may find it easier to express something meaningful or to understand what someone else is trying to communicate beneath their words. Discussions may feel more honest, more revealing, and more focused on what actually matters. The key dynamic of today is understanding, not just what happened, but why it felt the way it did. Because once something is understood, its intensity begins to transform, and what once felt like pressure can become clarity.
To understand the deeper psychology of March 25th, we need to look at what happens when depth becomes something the mind can work with rather than something it reacts to. Pluto represents intensity, hidden layers, and the deeper forces that influence behavior beneath awareness. It does not bring lightness. It brings truth, often in a way that feels strong or unavoidable. When Pluto is activated through tension, as it was yesterday, that truth can feel like pressure. It can surface emotions, attachments, or dynamics that are difficult to immediately process. Mercury changes how that experience is handled. Mercury represents thought, interpretation, and the ability to make sense of experience. It does not create the intensity, but it determines how that intensity is understood. When Mercury forms a supportive connection with Pluto, something important shifts. The same depth is still present, but the relationship to it changes. Instead of reacting to what is felt, the mind begins to interpret it. This creates a psychological state where insight becomes possible. You may notice that something you felt strongly about yesterday now appears clearer, not because the feeling has disappeared, but because you can now see what it was connected to. The mind begins linking emotional reactions with underlying causes. This is where emotional intelligence deepens. Rather than being overwhelmed by intensity, you begin to understand it. You may recognize why something affected you, what it represents, or what it is revealing about your current direction. Another important aspect of Mercury-Pluto is precision. Pluto brings depth, but it can also be broad and overwhelming when not understood. Mercury narrows that depth into something specific. It allows you to identify exactly what matters within a situation, rather than feeling everything at once. This reduces confusion. You may feel more focused on the core issue rather than being distracted by surrounding details. The mind becomes more selective, choosing what to engage with and what to release. This can also enhance communication. You may find it easier to express something that previously felt difficult to put into words. Conversations may move beyond surface-level topics into something more meaningful, but without the same emotional charge that might have been present before. At the same time, this alignment supports honesty. Not forced honesty, but natural clarity. You may feel less inclined to avoid certain topics because they now feel understandable rather than overwhelming. This does not mean everything needs to be said. It means you are more aware of what is true. Another psychological shift today is integration. What was previously experienced as separate layers, thoughts, emotions, reactions, begins to come together. The mind and the deeper emotional systems start communicating more effectively. This creates coherence. Instead of feeling pulled in different directions, you may feel more aligned internally. Even if something is still complex, it may no longer feel confusing. The deeper lesson of this transit is understanding transforms intensity. Pluto does not remove what is deep. Mercury makes it usable. Because once you understand what something means, you are no longer reacting to it in the same way. You are working with it. And that is where real transformation begins.
On a practical level, March 25th may feel like a day where things begin to make sense without the same emotional weight attached to them. You might notice that something which felt intense yesterday now feels easier to understand. The situation itself may not have changed, but your relationship to it has. Instead of feeling pulled into the emotion, you may feel more capable of observing it. This creates a different kind of experience. You are still aware of what matters, but you are less overwhelmed by it. You may find yourself thinking more clearly about something that previously felt complicated. A reaction you had may now seem understandable. A conversation may take on a new meaning when you look at it from a more neutral perspective. This is how insight begins to stabilize. Another pattern that may appear today is focused thinking. Your mind may feel more precise, less scattered, and more interested in understanding specific details rather than general impressions. You may be drawn toward identifying what is actually important within a situation rather than trying to process everything at once. This can improve decision-making. When you understand what matters most, it becomes easier to respond effectively. You may also notice that communication feels more intentional. Conversations may move beyond surface-level interaction into something more meaningful, but without the intensity that might have been present before. You may feel more comfortable expressing something that requires honesty because it now feels clearer rather than emotionally overwhelming. At the same time, listening becomes more important. You may find that you understand others more easily when you pay attention to what they are actually saying rather than reacting immediately. There may be a stronger awareness of underlying meaning, but without the need to interpret everything deeply. Another noticeable pattern is emotional regulation. Situations that might have triggered a strong reaction yesterday may now feel more manageable. You may still feel the same emotions, but they are less likely to take control of your response. This creates space to think, to choose, and to respond with intention. You may also feel a natural desire to resolve something, not in a rushed way, but in a way that feels complete. When something becomes clear, there is often a tendency to bring it to a point of understanding or closure, even if that closure is internal. The key approach today is thoughtful engagement. Notice what feels clearer. Notice what you now understand that you did not fully understand before, and allow that understanding to guide your actions rather than reacting to the intensity of the moment. Because today is not about avoiding depth, it is about learning how to work with it. Now bring this shift from intensity into understanding into your own experience, sign by sign. Today is not about avoiding what felt deep yesterday. It is about making sense of it and allowing that understanding to guide your next step. If you're an Aries, something that felt intense or personal yesterday may now feel clearer. You may understand why you reacted the way you did, or why something mattered so much. Growth for you lies in using that awareness to act more precisely rather than reacting with the same intensity again. If you're a Taurus, this clarity may relate to your attachments. You may recognize why you were holding on to something or why letting go felt difficult. Growth comes from understanding the emotional value behind your choices and deciding whether it still aligns with your stability. If you're a Gemini, conversations may begin to make more sense. Something that felt unclear or emotionally charged may now feel easier to interpret. Growth lies in recognizing the meaning behind communication without overcomplicating it. If you're a Cancer, emotional insight deepens. You may understand why something affected you in the way it did. Growth comes from allowing that understanding to support your emotional balance rather than revisiting the feeling itself. If you're a Leo, social or personal dynamics may become clearer. You may recognize the underlying structure of a situation or a relationship. Growth lies in using that awareness to choose how you engage moving forward. If you're a Virgo, your focus may turn toward practical understanding. Something that felt complicated may now feel manageable because you see its core. Growth comes from simplifying your approach based on what you now understand. If you're a Libra, relationships may feel more defined. You may understand what a connection represents at a deeper level. Growth lies in aligning your actions with that clarity rather than maintaining uncertainty for balance. If you're a Scorpio, this energy may feel natural but more refined. You may notice that your ability to see beneath the surface becomes more controlled. Growth comes from using that insight intentionally rather than becoming absorbed in it. If you're a Sagittarius, your direction may feel more grounded. Something that felt intense may now feel meaningful in a clearer way. Growth lies in integrating that meaning into your forward movement. If you're a Capricorn, your sense of control or responsibility may become more balanced. You may understand where effort is needed and where it is not. Growth comes from directing your energy efficiently. If you're an Aquarius, your perspective may deepen without becoming overwhelming. You may understand something important about your environment or relationships. Growth lies in applying that insight constructively. And if you're a Pisces, your emotional and mental understanding may begin to align. Something that felt confusing may now feel coherent. Growth comes from trusting that alignment and allowing it to guide your choices.
As we close March 25, notice the difference between feeling something and understanding it. Yesterday may have brought intensity. You may have felt something more strongly than expected. A reaction may have stayed with you. A situation may have carried more weight than it appeared to on the surface. Today did not remove that depth. It translated it. What once felt heavy may now feel meaningful. What once felt confusing may now feel structured. What once felt overwhelming may now feel understandable. This is how transformation often works, not by removing what is deep, but by allowing it to become clear. You may have noticed that something made more sense today without needing to force it. A realization may have formed quietly. A thought may have settled into something stable. This kind of understanding does not demand attention. It changes how you relate to what you already experienced. And that shift is important. Because when you understand something, you are no longer reacting to it in the same way. You are no longer inside the intensity. You are able to observe it, interpret it, and choose how to respond. Tonight, you might reflect on something simple.
What felt intense yesterday that now feels clearer? What did I begin to understand about my own reactions? And how does that understanding change the way I move forward? These questions are not about analyzing further. They are about recognizing what has already changed. Because insight does not always arrive as a breakthrough. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet sense that something finally makes sense. And when something makes sense, it becomes easier to carry, not as pressure, but as understanding. And that understanding is what allows you to move forward with more intention, more awareness, and less resistance.